I was born in 1936, November 21st, and
And your full name?
full name is James Allen Rome.
Okay.
Other than that, I've had a few nicknames along the way.
Well, maybe we'll get
Some
into
good
that.
ones and some not so good. So,
So where did you come from? When did you move to
okay,
Jerome?
I was born in Minnesota in a little town called Bagley Village, and my aunt raised me. She was my mother's oldest, their sister, raised me until I was 6, and so I really don't remember those first 6 years all that well, but I remember from 6 on. And so that was in Butte, Montana, 1942, and the wars were just going, and I was supposed to start school in Butte, Montana, because it wasn't my father, but my mother's boyfriend at the time, right? And it was just a matter of everybody worked. It was summertime, and most kids, if you were old enough, had jobs. But all the kids that were too young to be working at a job for the war type thing, they kept the movie theater open from fairly early in the morning, late in the afternoon. And the fact that my dad working in the mines, I've got a brother that disagrees with me because he logged along the coast when I got older. But in the beginning, he got out of the mining because he was a powder monkey and had damage with one of his eyes.
Oh my goodness! Now,
So he lost his job.
what mine did he work in?
Huh?
What mine and where?
You know, I don't know the name of the mines, but Butte, Montana,
In Butte, Montana.
was a big mining town, just
Oh,
like
okay.
Jerome.
Okay.
And I always thought it was coal, but I guess they mined copper too. And, so I'm not too sure about that history because I never looked it up to see. But all I know is because he had damage to his eyes, we moved out onto the Rome Ranch. It was a Montana cowboy that was working in the mines, right? But we moved out there because within about a couple miles from the homestead there was a school. And it was real small, and that's where I was going to start the first grade. And when we got there, there was a note on the door. There wasn't enough. They needed to have 6 students, and they didn't have enough, so there was going to be no school that year.
Oh my goodness.
So I missed the first grade. But in a certain sense, the summer I spent in the movie theater, evidently my aunt, because she had 3 daughters, and they were all older than me, I could already read, do some writing, I knew my math, and I could read adult material.
No
So
kidding.
I was, some way I learned quite a bit, right? And
Your older sister.
sitting in that theater for summer, like on weekends, I think there was time where they had off and I wasn't in, but it seemed like it was about 5 days a week that I was in the movie theater, which was great because they showed a lot of old films and that, and there's certain ones that stuck with me even at 6 years old. And one was at one of the films, I keep forgetting the name of it, but it had to do with the reality of, here I'm forgetting the basis of all my work for so long. It just had to do with, creation and evolution.
Uh-huh.
And as a 6-year-old, I saw them blending together because you plant a seed and you're not picking tomatoes the next day. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And man has evolved, and there's a peak of, I guess, around 6,000 years ago when man's evolution really took off.
Yes.
And so I just knew that something's wrong with the thinking in this movie because there's no difference. I mean, the two have to go together. Everything evolves, right? So how can you exclude evolution from creation?
Right.
So that stuck with me, but it was way back in my mind, and I didn't think about it too much. Every so often things would come up, you know, but finally when I got into my artwork, this is when it started showing up.
Yeah, those two, the idea from that movie and just the visual stimulation you received as a youngster, you feel
Well,
like that oriented you to become
yeah,
an artist
it
or a
was just
visual
that
person?
one subject matter in that one movie. I'm going, I don't get their point of why, you know, because I can remember because of later on I got into the Victory Gardens and everything and stuff like that. But early on I knew a lot more than, in fact, that's when I figured out that adults can get away with lying, but you're taught not to lie. And I'm going, why is that adults can do it and get away with it? But as a kid, even when you're trying to tell the truth, someone would say you're lying.
Right.
Because I got accused at one point, and in fact, my mother would have somebody visiting, a couple of women one day, and I've always had dealt with 4 younger brothers and adults. Very few children my own age that I hang out with until in Butte, and even then, you remember the old movies, Our Gang?
Yes.
Well, I was watching those on it, and so some of the older kids that were out there when the movies were up, I tried to tag along with them, and they chased me off and didn't want me around them, right? So stuff like that went on, and I got myself in trouble at times because if I wasn't in the movie, I was on the streets for an hour or two a lot of times,
Right.
trying to follow them around. And I even saw that, they went on this one street corner and would pick up newspapers, and they would go, and I saw they were selling them, so I thought, well, I knew if I got 2 newspapers and sold them, there was this long one wall close to where these bars were, kind of across from we lived in a hotel. My mother worked in on the second floor. She worked in the bar restaurant area of the hotel, and we were on a flight up above that. And all I know is that right across the street, this place you could get a hamburger for 10 cents. Because the guy had fold up the boards, this little opening, and I remember what they were. You got dill pickle and mustard and onion on them, and that was it, right? So I got 2 newspapers, went into Bar Rex next door, sold them right away, got 10 cents, and went and got them. So the next day I decided I'm going to do that again. Well, I got nabbed. Because the kids right away, somebody was missing 2 newspapers, right? And so they just watched to see where those 2 were going.
Right.
So I got taken home and told that, I'm not supposed to be stealing newspapers.
So did you go to high school in?
Huh?
Did you go to high school in Butte, Montana?
Oh, no, because I didn't even go to grade school. That's when we went out to the Rome Ranch.
Right.
So I totally missed the 1st grade.
Okay.
So my 1st grade education, I figured, was that summer.
Gotcha.
Right.
Well, so you grew up in Butte though? When did you leave there?
When I was 6.
Oh, you left Butte when you were 6.
6.
Oh, I thought there was another place you were before Butte.
Well, with my aunt.
Yeah.
Which I didn't remember.
Okay.
So
Sorry. I got confused.
everything I remember starts in Montana.
Well, then where did you, so where were you living when you came to Jerome?
Oh, in Scottsdale.
Oh, no kidding.
Because after, I always try to plant this Butte, Montana as my beginning of my education.
All right.
Right, and so I missed it. So I lived on the ranch and watched everything that went on. And they didn't raise cattle. They gathered up wild horses. And they would have like a mini rodeo at summer that ended, but it was still good weather, except when we went to check out the school, there was a bit of snow on the ground. So they hitched up a one-horse sleigh, and my dad had made skis, even skis for me, and he made himself, and he made a sled with skis on it. And the big thing was going to the school, they put a rope behind the sleigh, and my dad was on skis behind us, right, all the way to it, because there was enough snow for it. So I remember stuff like that. And then going through a summer, and I remember the ranch house, and
Right.
But it wasn't my father, so it was just the Rome family I got to meet them up.
Okay. So how'd you end up in Phoenix?
Well,
or Scottsdale?
going from that, I went to. Boy, I have to kind of cover a whole period of time in there because it was through the military when I got out. I ended up, because I wanted to start an art career, and I dropped off the wife and 2 daughters because I was drafted in '59.
Oh, wow.
So not too long after being out of high school and all that. And,
Yeah. You went to the Army?
Yeah. And once I got in, I ended up in air traffic control school. Well, I wanted to get out of it because when you're drafted, you get, in fact, I was pulled aside when I was getting shots because my high school, I did well enough in it that I qualified, they told me, for officers candidate school.
Right.
And I'd also remember the movies of watching the war going on.
Yes.
I saw how all these second lieutenants, they would lead squads and they'd go out and be in some of the most dangerous spots, and a lot of them didn't last long. And then as a 6-year-old, I kind of remembered that.
Right.
So I declined the officers candidate school. But after I finished my second 8 weeks of training, I ended up in Tacoma, Washington, and that was an area where they were staging war exercises for Vietnam and stuff like that. And I got myself out of that by watching for schools that would come up on bulletin boards. And I'd taken typing in high school, and so I said, okay, I'm going to apply for this school because I'll be in some office. I won't be out bivouacking out in the fields and everything, right? And not that I wouldn't have mind. I kind of like the idea of battles and fights and stuff like that. And, that mentality was going on. But I got in and found out, well, I knew I couldn't type very good. But the military has this thing that if you have to type up a paper, you can't make corrections. You have to type all the way through it without corrections. And I was so slow at making sure I didn't make mistakes, I started watching the bulletin board again. And there came up air traffic control school, because they were going to need a lot of air traffic people, not only on the ground, but in the towers and everything. So I applied for it, qualified. So I spent, it had to be 6 months of 8 hours a day training for that.
Yeah.
And I didn't end up in the tower, but I ended up on the Carmack and the base operations of the airfield behind the desk, and I had to check out flight plans. And we had McCord Air Force bases connected right close to Fort Lewis. And so they had a weather station there. So I had to get in, check weather for wherever the flights are going and see if it all looked okay. Then I would hand it over to the officer on duty for the day, and they would look it over and check it off and that.
Yeah. Did you say that you got interested in art after you left the Army?
Huh?
Did you say you got interested in art after you left the Army?
No, it came before that.
Oh, no kidding.
In a variety of ways. I actually did a portrait for one of the guys working, and he wanted something out of his military uniform to send home to his parents, so he was in a sports coat and everything like that.
And you did a painting.
I did a painting of him. The only thing I did that was kind of odd is, like, he didn't know it, but after I did it, because I knew I could paint it out, because he was with a shirt and all that, but he didn't wear a tie. He had it open, but it was buttoned, and on the first button, I put it about this half inch below where you tuck it in, hanging by a thread, like it was ready to fall off, right? And then when I pointed it out to him, because I was going to change it if he was that, but he had kind of a sense of humor anyway. Oh, he thought, well, that's perfect. I love it that way.
Cool.
So, and I was actually doing a lot of different things. My time was it was pretty serious business what my work was about, because.
Well, did you hold on a second? When did you start painting? In high school and as a young person?
Well, I did a lot of art. I did the artwork for all the annuals that came out
In Butte.
from freshman to senior. So I was getting some artwork doing that, and I found out in the third grade at one of the schools I went to, and the teacher took all of the artwork, and it was 1 through 8. So, and I was in the third grade at the time, and I really liked it because it taught through the 8th grade, and there was only about 20 students in the school. So I do the third grade stuff. I was beyond that already mentally, and I could listen to all the other classes. So I got kind of a 1st through 8th grade education in that 1 year.
Wow.
Right, because I was just eavesdropping on the other classes.
Yeah.
And so I like that school to this day. I think that was perfect because the teacher took the older girls and had them teach the younger kids.
That's the way it used to be done in the schoolhouse.
Right, because not only did they have to know what they were teaching,
right,
the kids liked it and everything. And I thought, that's how they should run schools now.
They should.
Just put them all together like that.
Hold on, hold on 1 second. I'm getting a squeak from that table, and I want to see if we can edit this out. I want to see if I can put a little thing here and maybe keep it from.
Okay, I'm kind of leaning on it.
Yeah, that's okay. I want you to be comfortable. I think that'll be better.
I feel comfortable.
How are we doing, Maggie?
This thing stopped. So.
It stopped?
Yeah.
Okay. Stop it and let's start again. I'm going to do another. Did it start?
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, in that school,
I want to.
if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Because I'm trying to build a foundation here for you. The schools have art. And I drew this picture of a deer, and then I guess the teacher took it to the either county or state thing and entered all the kids' artwork, how they do at fairs and all that.
Sure.
And I got a 3rd place. But that was from 1st through 8th grade. So that was, first any award for anything I had ever done, right?
I didn't realize you had started so early.
Yeah, and it was just kind of the beginning of it. And so anyway, in the the service came about because after drafting and going through it, and then I opted out because I knew that my next trip was going to be Vietnam. And to get into the school, I had to, even though I was drafted, I had to enlist. So I actually put in 3 years, 4 months, and 7 days. I remember that. But I think they thought I would be a good career soldier. And no, I wanted to be an artist.
Right.
I had decided that, I guess, going back, because I always was pretty good with the art from the time I was in the 3rd grade.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I got out, packed up the family and left Tacoma, and in Portland, Maryland's, that was my wife at the time, we got married in 63, I guess it was, if I remember right there. I could be off on that page, but anyway, I dropped her and had 2 daughters while in the service, $5.65 each. That's what they charge her. And dropped them off with her parents and headed for LA to start an art career.
Oh, no kid. You left your wife and kids?
I left them and said, I'll see you later. I didn't know how long it was going to take, but it took 3 months. He's first knocking on doors, trying to find jobs oriented towards some kind of art. It was kind of hard following the newspaper and getting around LA.
Yeah.
By, not knowing it. And yeah, well, I had a car. I drove, had a 51 Ford 2-door at the time that I was driving, and I got through my father-in-law. He was a Methodist minister. He gave me a contact in LA to get for finding a place to live, which was pretty good because for about 3 weeks I lived with this family. It was another minister but I kept looking for a place to live too, along with the job. And ends up, I missed the job on designing boxes, but I went through quite a few people, guys, all guys, no, not one girl in this room, and at each time he went in, there was less, and I missed by one. So then I went to a company called Genge Industries, and they found work for you. So they found a job for me as a draftsman, because I fudged that, I think I can do that. I never took any drafting. And I got hired, and they put me in this gymnasium side room with all these tables. Ends up there, I was working on the schematics for the Atlas missile and the electronic things. And when they made changes, they'd bring you the plans, and you had to make corrections. Uh-huh. So for new ones, right? And I just asked the 2 guys next to me and said, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? They were real good. It didn't take me too long to pick up what that was. But I wanted something else, so I told Genge Industries that if you find anything else, let me know. And they did. It was, I don't know if you've heard of Aaron Brothers. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was for them. And they had, in Huntington Park, they had one of their stores, and they needed somebody to work there. And they had the black sheep of the family running it, because they do framing too.
Yes.
See, and so I knew, okay, somebody will show me how, and I'll pick that up, because I always could make things right, and I knew I'll be able to do the framing. And so after a couple of days, I said, well, maybe even on the first day, okay, are you going to show me the framing? He says, no. He says, I don't know anything about that. You got to figure that out for yourself. Perfect. Because I knew if I don't have anybody hanging over my shoulder, I'll pick it up pretty quick, and I did. and also because he was the black sheep, and this had been one of the old department stores where they have the tube things, you put the money in and it goes up to where
yeah.
there's a mezzanine,
Uh-huh.
where the office was.
Yes.
And they use that office space for all the other, they had 23 stores going in LA, right? And if a painting got damaged or a frame,
Right.
they just stacked it up. So in my spare time, I started taking paintings, cut them down to size, find a frame that would, and repairing paintings.
Yeah.
And they realized I had some value, right? Because the store started making more money, I think.
Yeah. Well, were you doing artwork yourself, your own artwork at that time?
At that time, let's see, my concentration, no, I wasn't, because I had a job to do, plus finding a place for my wife and daughters and all of that. It was pretty busy, just working, right? So
Well,
it really came about, I maybe did a little bit of it, but it was more when they asked me after about a month, they said, hey, we're going to open, guess where? A store in Compton. And I was living in Bell Gardens, and Bell Gardens was the dog that, it was lowest level. The cheapest rent you could find was in Bell Gardens. So I said, okay, and they want to open this, and they said that we would like you to head it up, and we'll deliver materials and everything that you're going to need, and we'll get you some help, which you never did. I ended up doing it all myself. They knew they were testing me, I think, on that. So it ended up that I got that put together in about a month and a half, and I had to build racks, all kinds of display stuff and everything. And so, okay, they come to me and said, look, we're thinking about opening up in Arizona. And they knew I had no ties in LA and all that. I'm thinking about all those movies I saw in the 6th grade, that West, oh yeah, in the West, there's cowboys and Indians and everything I had an interest in. Sure, I have no problems with that. Within a few days, I'm on my way. And I left, I didn't take the family right away because I had to find a place to live and get it started. But within a month, I got them because they were still living in Bell Gardens, right?
Okay.
And I didn't wait, maybe it wasn't even a month, but I got a place for us to live, opened up a new store. Again, I was doing a lot of the fabrication, as putting a gallery, and a gallery and picture framing.
Right.
And so I did that for about 2 years, and that's when I got there, I started painting. Because I had a place that I rented a place that I had a good studio room and everything. So after work, I would go up and paint until midnight or into the morning, and then go run. So I was painting, and I started. I didn't necessarily put my own work in the
gallery.
The gallery, but I was looking around, and I found another gallery outside that. So I kept them separate, because I just figured that would be the smartest thing to do. And I kept up the picture framing with the idea that because my paintings, I'm starting to build up a stock, right? And just one day, Ray LaPierre, who was their general manager in LA, he'd show up about every 2 or 3 weeks, do a lot of paperwork. I did everything, the paperwork, as far as taking care of the gallery and picture framing. But he then would put it into the business end of things. And he hired this girlfriend to do commercial framing. and motels and stuff
Right.
where they'd put
Yeah.
up the cheaper stuff.
Buy
And,
50 at a time. Yeah.
and I quit because she came to me one day and she had this contract she wrote up and needed to get it done right away. And I said, no, I can't do it right now because I've got custom work. Custom work pays a lot. You make a lot of money on it. The other stuff was cheaper. And I said, it's going to be a couple of weeks because I've already got stuff lined up with people with dates they plan on picking it up. And I'll set all those others ahead and allow a week or so for whatever you
Sure.
need. No, it has to be done now. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And Ray happened to be up at his office at this time, and she went up, and I guess I irritated her so much she was crying to him that I wouldn't do the work. And he came down, was to use pissed off about me upsetting her. And I said, well, we can't do it. And he said, well, you're going to. I said, no, I'm not. It's not good for the business. I mean, it'd be bad. And he picks up a hammer and he actually throws it in my direction and stomps up and goes upstairs. And I thought, well, this is the end of my job. And I walked out the door, left him right with the business and
the
everything.
hammer.
And
And a
I didn't
crying
go home
girlfriend.
and tell Marilyn that I quit my job. It took me 2 weeks to get to that point. I would leave the house every day, and I went around to other frame shops. You get to know people after a couple years.
Sure.
The things get around, and I never asked for any work. And finally, I thought, I got to find a gallery and get something going. So that's what I did, and it took me a bit, but eventually got into a good gallery in Scottsdale. The guy's name was Steve Martin. He and his partner were real estate guys, made a fortune in real estate, and he was into graphics. He collected Mexican and Japanese graphics, so that's what he had. And ended up perfect because he needed framing. And so I opened up a framing shop of my own with some backing from him right next door to the gallery. Right? And it worked out really good for us. And in fact, in one show, and I had plenty of work at home and I could keep giving them. And I sold, it was figured out in a month's period, I sold like 56 pieces of work.
Wow.
Because-
What was your topic? What was your subject matter at that time?
Desert.
And so
I started
landscapes?
going out on location.
Okay.
And he helped me get into Arizona State because I wanted to get into printmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was handling prints and that, and I liked the idea of it. And so I decided, well, I wanted to get into etching. So he was a scholar before he was selling real estate.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, and he went and got me in, and without having all the preliminary stuff before you could do the etching. And so I was able to sit in class all day long, right? And so I was teaching just as much as I was working on my own work, which helps you understand what you're doing a little bit better.
Absolutely,
And,
yeah.
so when I got into etchings, he was handling my etchings too.
Wow. So you literally launched your art career in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yeah,
And
one gallery was in Phoenix, and then I jumped to the Steve Martin gallery because he was just opening.
Yeah.
So I helped him lay out the gallery. In fact, it had low ceilings, and I made walls that with spring-loaded at the top where you could pick it up and push up the spring, tilt it,
Okay.
away, and go and stick it up another place. So every show we had all this different layout
I see.
depending on
Interesting.
what the show was.
Yeah.
And
So let's move. Are we getting close to you moving to Jerome?
yep, because I kept painting in the desert and spreading out.
Yes.
So that's where I started looking at the map and think, well, maybe I'll just get out of the low desert and see what's up in the mountains. Because I grew up in Oregon along the coast with my dad logging prior to all this, right?
Right.
And so I like being in timber country and that, and so I started painting there, and round up in here, and I go, Jerome, hey, I kind of like that name. I want to go see it, and it's a mining town, and it had shut down in the 50s, and this was in 63.
This was in 63.
Well, I mean, 66 is when that happened. Then I finally got up here and thought, perfect, because even in the desert, if I found any old roundup areas where the cattle were rounded up, because all of that was a lot of old barbed wire and rustic stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what got me up to Jerome, and
So you had to go convince the wife and
and it
kids.
took me a while. My wife wanted to move to Sedona. She had seen it a few times because in summers I'd pack up from Scottsdale my kids and head towards Oregon to visit family, right? And I would take different routes, but we'd go through Sedona because it's a series of campgrounds, right? And so she wanted that, and I tried to get her interested in Jerome. So it took me about a year, and I came up on another painting trip, and I'd spend about a week up here painting, right? And then I noticed that, oh, here's a house for sale, and it's the one.
Where did you stay when you were here?
Huh?
Where did you stay when you came up to paint and just visit?
Spirit room.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, they had a lot of empty rooms, and I had the one room that I kind of liked, and I would sit and with the I can not remember their names right now.
The Conlons?
Yes.
Yeah.
And at nights it was really slow in the bars, so I just sat around BSing with them. And in fact, at one time, I could have for $57,000 bought that whole complex of it. And I'm so much into my art, I didn't go like the Steve and his partner, the real estate guys that are running this gallery. I didn't go say, hey, I think this is a pretty good deal. And because they had a spot upstairs with a big skylight.
Yeah.
It would have been a good studio space for me. But I already had by then a space in the high school.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, where Robin and Margot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that one room was going to be an operating room. It faces, it's got a big skylight in
Yes.
it.
Uh-huh.
And because natural light at that time was the best thing you could get for operating and all that. And it was someplace along the way they realized it's too small. So that's when they turned it into the high school, and they built the hospital.
Yeah, the real hospital. And they had a
Upright.
skylight up there
Yeah.
too, I remember.
So
wow, so the high school was shut down in I thought it was still open until about the early 70s.
No, for about a year and a half, 2 years, Ann Bassett's dad was the
John
only.
Bassett.
Yeah, he was the only one that had a space down there by the gymnasium, and
Yeah,
all his junk stuff that he worked with. That's where he stored it.
I remember.
And then I was in the other building where Robin and Margot are.
Now this is in 63?
This was in 66.
60s, okay.
When I first came up, but took me until 68 before I bought a house.
Okay.
And it was in 68 I bought a house on the curve past the church.
Oh, no kidding.
Right on that curve.
The blue house?
It's the one that's green. It's got a stairway going up to it out front. It didn't have when I bought it.
Okay.
But it was commercial on the lower level, and you entered the house from up on School Street.
Okay.
And you entered on the top floor, and the bottom floor was was not even connected by a stairway.
What did you pay for the house,
Huh?
if you don't
Well,
mind my asking?
it started out at 11,500, but the day I had put earnest money down on it, so the day I go up to make the deal solid, I was supposed to meet the real estate guy on School Street at the back where you could enter. And as I'm walking down to it, I see there's two couples down there. I wonder what they're doing there. Ends up, they put earnest money down on it. And the house was owned by a California school teacher, and her summers were spent in Jerome. And she had it loaded with antiques and everything, and I'm going, all the antiques came with the house and all that. Sure enough, we had to get a key. I called the real estate company. They said, well, we haven't seen him for a few days and we don't know where he is. Well, he had packed up all that stuff and split all the antiques in 2 floors of the house, mainly the upper floor, but she used the bottom too. Anyway, shoot, so didn't do anything on it. A year later, I come up to paint, and there's the house for sale, and it's up to 12,500. So I just went and made a deal right off with him there, and then went home and told Marilyn would be moving, and it would be to Jerome. And so she didn't like it at first, but she grew to like Jerome, and she did quite well at it. And I had some galleries that I started opening up. And
wow. So what was going on in town when you got that? So
well,
it was 1960. It was 1968 that you finally moved here.
No, it was 70 because I spent 2 years coming up and painting and working on the house.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's really, I said 70 before I brought I would stay in the house when I'd come up painting otherwise, right? And I didn't really have it all together yet.
Right.
But I didn't need to have it, it was just me. But finally I thought by 70 it was good enough shape that I had heat in the house, water, electricity, and everything working.
So you had done pretty well selling art down in Scottsdale in order to get some grub stake together to buy a house here and move away. You must have been feeling pretty confident that you could support a family.
Yeah, because Steve was a good salesman, and
just
we got along
keep
really
them coming, huh?
Together, yeah. And his sales for me, I was making decent money at the time, like you say. I could afford to put out the 12,500, and then we ended up selling the house in I think '86, someplace in there.
Okay, let me be sure which house this is again. If you go up from here past the Methodist Church, and you know on the left of the road before the turn, there's that
well,
blue,
you know where
house.
the Y is by the Hotel Jerome, where the co-op is.
Yeah.
Well, you have to go up all the way up, double back, because School Street comes at that Y after you come down the hill.
Yes, I know where you are.
It veers off right there.
To School Street. I know, I used to live down there.
Yeah, and so on School Street is where you enter the house.
Oh, so it's right along that strip where top of Roberto's house is, and across the street lives, what's her name? She has the bookstore. But along that straight strip, that's where your house was.
Yeah, as you come down.
Is it next door to the Ghost City Inn?
No, Ghost City Inn. I've got to remember where the Ghost City Inn.
That's the one that the chief of police had for a little while.
Well, once you turn right past going around past Paul and Jerry's.
Yes.
It's School Street is the first.
Oh no, I know where School Street
is,
Jim.
It's the first street there, and.
I'm trying to figure out which house on School Street it is.
From the right, that's Roberto. They have.
They have that 3-story blue house, and on School Street you just see the little tripod, the little roof.
Once you make that turn on School Street, there's only a few houses. Then there's a long stairway that heads up to
Yep.
the highway.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a house there.
Mhm.
And there's a big lot.
Yep.
The entrance, there's another almost 3-story house there, my nose position. And you go, the stairway to the house is right there by that other house.
So you go down?
Yeah, you
Okay, you go down.
off
So
of
the
School
front of
Street.
the street is actually on Highway,
On the highway.
80. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
And
right
it's right at,
right at the curve where
Right.
Carol Yacht's house is.
yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you. I just wanted to
Mentally
might
get a
take,
picture
might take
of
a
it. Yeah.
picture of it to include.
Yeah, and I never did get a stairway down
Yeah.
to use the commercial end of it because I had a good studio space at the high school, so I didn't even work at home on my painting and
Huh.
everything.
Well, you got me. So the high school had closed by this time, and that's
Eh,
why
eh,
they had some spaces
Yeah, I think the high school maybe closed in '68.
there. They
Something
keep,
like
I think it might have been 1970.
Someplace in there because it was school. Yeah, Ann's dad there. He had been in there about a year or so, and
Yeah. Okay. Well, wow. Which building did you have a studio in?
the one that Robin and
Robin and
Margot
Margot.
have. Yeah,
Okay. Were
because
they
I
there?
had that great skylight that was going to be the
on
operating
the second story.
room.
Yeah, and there's a little.
That's what
porch out
really
there.
interested me about it. It was
Sure.
perfect studio.
North light.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now Robin and Margot weren't there yet.
Oh no.
Okay.
I was in that, I think, 4 years before they showed up.
Any other artists there at the time?
Only Ann's dad.
No kidding.
well-
He was in the other building.
Yep. And what was perfect for him is he was right there by the entrance to the gymnasium.
Yes, I know.
So that he could work. He used the gym as his workshop and
Yep.
everything.
Yeah, I met him.
Back then?
I used to come up here in '73 with my family,
Okay.
and we would stay at the Powder Box Church before it.
Oh.
When Ann Gale and George Wiseman bought it, and it was still kind of a mess.
Okay.
Today it's a little dollhouse, but
Yeah.
back then we would come up and stay in Jerome over the weekend. So
Okay.
I knew who Don Bassett was because we would explore.
Okay.
So,
well.
so it was just you and Don Bassett were the only artists down there at the time.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of who else was.
Yeah, any other painters that
There-
you were friends
there-
with?
No, I think
Or-
it was about the time I was changing in some ways with my art. Because the elevation of my art, I was already getting into more abstract thoughts about it and everything, but I was still painting the kind of stuff that would sell.
Of course, the landscape still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would just paint it around in our area up here.
Yeah. I'm curious about who the were there other painters here? You were like the vanguard. One of the first
There
ones?
was
We have many today.
there were 3. 2 of them, if I can remember, offhand, I don't know if their names are going to come to me. One went to Williams, and I'm not too sure. A lot of these names stuck with me, but I'm
That's okay.
finding myself forget them. Roger Holt was the oldest one, and he painted these odd paintings on the backside of cardboard stuff that they had in the bar that was advertising on one side.
Uh-huh.
He'd flip it around and paint something on the back. And actually Steve Martin, who was dealing with the gallery, had been there before and bought some of his work, which was odd. You
He
know,
was a
that
good painter?
We crossed paths. And then,
This Steve was
He-
Roger was a good painter.
huh?
Was he a good painter, Roger?
Not really. It's just that he did it, and I think Steve Martin was intrigued, and the stuff was
It was a
Cheap.
curiosity being
right,
from Jerome.
and something that he could sell all that. So
Right. Get a story behind it and
Yeah.
sell it to somebody.
I don't know why my nose is itching.
Yeah, do you want a Kleenex or something?
No, it's just
Just itchy, huh?
I kept feeling like I got a fly on it. Anyway, yeah, and I keep wanting to remember because the guy that went to Williams, his work I continued to see around, and that. And yeah. Oh, Robert Knudsen was the other one.
Robert Knudsen?
Yeah, and he did a lot of drawings in that. Very good. He was a good artist, and maybe the other name will come to me, but out of Williams, he was doing a lot of things that had to do with reservation and that.
Right.
Painting up in that area. He painted on location.
Okay.
And
well, tell me something. Did you? This was a time period, and I've heard stories from other folks that when they first came here, that all the old timers who lived here during the mining area were a little uncomfortable about all the newbies showing up and buying homes, artists and kind of hippies. Did you consider yourself? How old were you in 1970 when you moved here?
Okay, well, let's subtract the time now, because 70 we got 30, 40. So I'm figuring I'm right about 59 years involved someplace in Jerome.
Wow.
If I started in the 70s up here.
Yeah, 1970 to 2018 is 40 years from 1970. Does that work out right? 8 and 0?
See, we got 18 and 30.
4. Yeah. So you're 81 now.
Yeah.
So you were 40, 39.
Someplace in that
okay.
sounds right, yeah.
Well, you didn't necessarily come here because Jerome was kind of becoming a bohemian artist colony.
Well,
you just came here because you liked the landscape.
My thing, I knew that, you know what, this is still early, and someday this was going to be a busy town, right? And because it was cheap, buying a house, and the fact that I could do it and not to have really any payments really helped,
Sure.
And so, yeah, that's what. And I like Jerome because maybe it's because when I was 6 years old, I was in a mining town. I don't know if there might be a correlation there or something, but I felt really comfortable, and I like working with woods, and that's why I got these galleries. I was able to do a lot of the fabricating of what was needed to open up a gallery and picture framing operations. And so that's what I did. I looked around, and at the spirit room, you know where the side entrance is, where the stairway goes up?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first two shops next to that was one shop. And I opened a gallery there, which Marilyn ran.
Oh.
So for quite a few years, I had a gallery. And then on one of my painting trips and everything, and that Marilyn got in a disagreement with, I forget his name, the son of, see, here I am.
The Conlons.
The Conlon.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't Conlon's. It was, they're more recent.
Okay.
No, they were there from the early 60s in the bar. And that's when, because I would come up and paint before I ever moved up, and that's when I got the offer. I was interested in buying because they were getting older, and their son, if I could remember his name, he he and Marilyn didn't get along very well, and I could deal with him, but the furnace went out, and she called him up to come and fix the furnace, and it was, no, you're going to have to take care of that yourself. Well, I was gone. So they got in this big disagreement, and I didn't try to patch things up. I just figured, okay, I'll open up another gallery, which I did was in the Submarine Bar. You know, that was...
Where's that?
You know where the English Kitchen is.
Yeah.
A couple doors up, the Submarine Bar is where those steps go down.
Okay. Right.
That's where you had to go down in, and it was a bar.
Where the library used to be.
Yeah, and I was before the library.
Okay.
And so I kind of tricked it out and made a gallery out of it. The trouble was people don't like to use stairs, and they might bend over and look in those low windows and could see in it. But I had a good gallery there, and I was still doing fine because I was selling work elsewhere
Right.
and that. And but that was where I had another
Right.
gallery space.
Did you have social contact with other artists here in town?
You know,
Are you a bit of a recluse?
I never hung out. If I was going to hang out with any artist, it was going to be in the bar.
Okay.
Because that's where you found out what was going on
Yeah,
in town.
still today.
And everything. And still the same today. And so if they hung out in the bar, then I would hang out with them. Otherwise, I was not into, I was into my own art, and I didn't even see other artists as competition, because I don't think like that. My mind was on what am I going to do next, and how am I going to expand my work and
Right.
and grow with it. So
Right.
that's why I went out on a lot of different directions, and
Okay.
even because I was already into etching, and I had Robin and Margot owned my press. I sold them my etching press.
Okay.
Because I was again trying to break away from some other stuff. Later, I wish I hadn't sold it to them, but at that time, it was taking me away from whatever else I was thinking about when
Right.
it came to art.
Well, what impressions of the community and the people in Jerome at that time? There were obviously lots of people coming, some from Portland, a lot of people from Portland, musicians, and what are your impressions of the culture at that time?
I know I was being tossed in there with the hippies.
Oh, by the old-timers?
But by age-wise, I was more half and half beatnik. You know, I picked that up when I got right out of high school, because I got a job of trimming windows in one of the Portland's Myron Franks, which was a 6-story, and they were the most expensive department store in downtown Portland.
Right.
And I just saw a job in the paper, and I thought, okay, you know, I'm just out of high school. I think I'll apply for it. And I got the job, and that was interesting. And
so you became a beatnik from that job?
Huh?
No, you were saying that you felt you were more like a beatnik here rather than a hippie here in Jerome.
Yeah, because I could go back that far, because I was invited to a party, and the two guys that were the regular window trimmers, I was a trainee. They were experienced at it, right?
Okay.
And so I was invited to a party, and it happened to be when I go in, I'm going, boy, I've never been in a place where everything's painted black, walls, ceiling, and that. But that was the main room where the party was. And I'm going, well, this is different. So I think that was my foundation of the beatnik part, right?
All right.
And I knew that the artist community was different than
than normal society.
just normal, right?
Well, there was, I mean, at the time in the 70s, there was lots of psychedelics and pot smoking and all that, were you involved with that, or were you aware of it, or how did you think of it here in Jerome?
The big thing was the bars were where you communicated with everybody.
Right.
And even the new ones, they would come in and hang out at the bar because there was nothing else going on in town.
Yes.
Once it closed, there was some different shops and everything, but most of the people were, unless you got involved with the politics in town, and I did finally at one point, and in fact that middle park, I think it was in '73 when I got on the council. I ran for office.
Oh, no kidding.
And I ended up as like vice president, or whatever you would call
vice
it.
mayor. Or...
Vice mayor,
Uh-huh.
right? And then as Paul Gross was running the Candy Kitchen, which you remember which one that is?
Yes.
Yeah. And they decided to move to wherever Pumpkin Center is, right? And so being vice mayor, I became mayor.
Oh, you did?
Yes, and I had already, when I became vice mayor, I wrote out a letter and put it in an envelope and put it in the safe. If anything ever happens with the mayor, I'll only be mayor for a short period of time because I don't want to be mayor. Right? I didn't want that responsibility because I take these things kind of serious, and I knew I'd be spending more time doing that than I wanted to because I wanted to spend it on my art.
Right.
Vice mayor, that's not my responsibility. But as vice mayor, I took up Parks and Recreation, and in '73, summer of '73, I was given 3 high school students, paid through CETA funding, right? The state or whatever paid for them, and I developed Middle Park. See, now, that was when we didn't have any money in town, and I don't know if you remember, it was laid out with power poles and all that. Yeah. So what I did, I made up a design where we could take dirt from above, pull it down below, and level things out, right? And
yes.
I terraced it up there, and they did the shovel pick work, and I had to kind of stay on them a bit. And there is, up on the back wall, you'll see the CETA funding in 1973. So that was one of the projects I took on for the town.
I didn't know that.
And kind of missed one thing. We used to have, before the fire department became as big as it is now, we'd have in the summertime, they'd have the firemen's, whatever they called it, they'd have competition.
Yes, the fire they pulled the water wagon.
Yes, they
Julie
did all
Perkins
that kind of
told
stuff.
me about that. Yeah.
And that big rock that's up there by the bulletin board, by the bleachers.
Yes.
There's a big rock. If you go look at the top of the rock, there are some small holes in it.
Okay.
They had a hand drilling contest. I actually got 3rd place in it. And you had all these big, tough-looking miner types that showed up from elsewhere, and all you had was a bit and like a 2.5-pound small short-handled sledgehammer, and you just have to hit it and turn it and hit it and turn it, and I kind of
showed him up.
Yeah, well, I knew by myself that, well, how long, didn't know how long we'd be doing it, but you start tiring when you hammer constantly, especially if you got 2.5 pounds on the end of it.
Yeah.
So I kind of got it down. I choked up on it a bit and anchored the handle to my arm, and so I wasn't having to use my wrist so much. It was my whole arm movement. They did, and
Very
Yeah,
clever.
I've got one of those, and I also with a Mexican friend that I met in town that was just next door to me up on the house that was there. He had worked in the mines some, and but it wasn't there. He was just young at the time and stayed, and his mother was still living at the house. But we got in on the taking a cart and having to, here I'm forgetting what they call the guys with the shovels that tossed it into the cart, and you had to fill it.
Muckers?
Yeah, well, I guess that's what it was. That's perfect name for it too, because they even took all this slag that came from them, which is heavy, dense stuff, and then watered it down because it's kind of porous in places too. So shoveling that and lifting it high enough to get it over the edge, we did that, and I don't remember how we came in. We did better than some of the others, and that was one where I hurriedly, when it ended, went in Paul and Jerry's and back in that big trough of a urinal. I threw up. I could feel myself getting kind of. My body wasn't going to last much longer until it ended. So I involved myself with that, and but that plus being on the console, so I got to know a certain amount, and of course all the fire department was voluntary at the time.
Right.
In fact, I helped in 2 different fires that took place when it went out, because you're just volunteers anyway, and one of them was down on the Bell property, when one of the houses caught fire down there.
Yeah. Now, so this was when Dave Hall was. Dave Hall was chief.
That's
he was your chief of
fire. Maybe before that even.
Okay.
And one of the other houses was on the Gulch Road.
Yeah.
Where you turn to the one of the first houses down on the right. It caught on fire with a candle by a window with a curtain, wind blowing it. Caught a curtain on fire.
Oh my goodness.
And that was like watching the, what were the guys that ran around in the fire engine in the movies that didn't know what they were doing?
The Three Stooges?
Huh?
The Three Stooges?
Not the Three Stooges, but it was
kind of Laurel and Hardy.
Well, when you get a bunch of volunteers that are normally not practicing,
yeah,
hooking up the hoses, because there was a connection needed to be made, and I'm getting there, and I've got one end of it, and the guy coming up with them, I had to look and say, no, I need a female end, not a male end.
Turn it around.
So they had to turn around and get the other end. So there was stuff like that going on.
Right.
And then there's a power pole right there with all the electrical and spray in the house. Water's getting sprayed on the power pole and everything. And I'm going, and this looks like that could be dangerous. I don't know. But 2 fires that I've got involved in.
Oh my goodness! Any other? That's a big thing to have designed the lower park. Any other things that you got involved in while you were in government?
What's that?
Any other projects that you got involved
in? Just kind of. Well, actually, I helped set up for the firemen's thing too, because we put things out for the kids. We'd put out a big pile of like sawdust, and then toss coins out into it.
Hold on 1 second, Jim. What's going on? You need to change the battery?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know so that.
All right, thanks. That's okay.
So there was other stuff that had to get done to make it all work, and I involved myself in that multiple times.
Did you have a feeling of pride?
Never thought about it like that.
No?
I just, it was something I enjoyed
Okay.
doing, and you volunteer. That's what so much was done
Right.
in Jerome, was volunteer work for the town.
Did you feel as part of the community? Did you feel a
Oh, yeah.
sense of community?
Yeah, I felt like what I was doing was important in a certain sense of keeping the town together and all that. And but I was my work was my center on it, but this was an outlet, working for the town to think about something different than that. So I kind of enjoyed that part because I got to help solve town problems and
Right.
so forth.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's far enough back. I've kind of forgotten a
Who-
lot of it.
Who were your friend? Who were friends to you and your wife and kids
Well,
here in town?
the first thing before I even opened any gallery in that, Dave Hall and Mike, there was three of them opened up where, what is it?
The Sullivan Building.
Yeah, because it's got the clock on it now
Yes.
and everything, yeah. And so I joined with them because they had some space, but they didn't last long there because there was too much dust in the air.
Well, he told me that the roof was completely off the building at that time, and they had like tarps or something to cover.
Well, that could be, but it didn't seem to get anything inside. It was just that the dust from them working with pottery and me working with wet paper, the combination was not very good. And so that's why I started looking up town. And as soon as that space came open by the Spirit Room, I rented that. And,
Okay.
and that was starting of the gallery because I knew that I had enough work. I could keep still working with the Scottsdale Gallery.
Yeah.
And
What was your production like? How many paintings would you get finished
well,
a week?
at that time, because I found out even in Scottsdale, I had to do about 3 a week.
Wow. Now, did you?
And because if painting on location, I'd work until I had 90% of the work done on the painting.
Really? So you
Yeah.
didn't work from photographs? You mostly worked
No, I was most of
plein air.
when I worked with photographs, it was for special effects stuff I wanted to do where I could change anything
Okay.
around on it. But when I painted landscapes, I just eliminated what I didn't
Simplify.
want in the painting
Yeah.
and put what I want.
Oh, okay.
I'd maybe move things around, but it's stuff I'm looking at out
Right.
there.
Now, did you paint plein air in acrylic or oil?
Oils.
Oh boy, that's
I
a
never,
challenge.
I was a traditional oil painter, and I studied it because for mediums, I
Right.
could even tell you the mixtures of mediums I used during hot weather as opposed to cooler weather.
Oh, no kidding.
And
Did you do like an underpainting, a quick
I-
raw
I-
umber
I-
or something
I-
sketch?
No, I would basically I would prime my own canvases and everything. And back then I was painting on good linen canvases. And so I would put a toner down,
Okay.
something that I wanted as a background to show through. And I wanted it to get tacky. So I'd mix my mediums to fit the temperatures of what I was working with. And on that, I knew that as soon as it got slightly tacky, and I did that by the amount of varnish. I'd mix sun thickened linseed oil.
Linseed
But-
oil?
Yeah,
Okay.
sun thickened linseed
okay.
oil, which means it has a tendency to dry a little faster than regular.
Oh, cool.
Like a lot faster.
I need to know that.
Yeah, well, you mix that and with turpentine, and by what you mixed up, when I got it tacky, I could lay the paint down, not paint into it, I could put it on top. So I was building layers up that way. So that's what made my paintings a little bit different than a lot. And then you'd see where things would cross, you'd see that underpainting and whatever the tone is would
Yes.
come through. And I would usually go from light to dark, and because the foreground would be darker, so that color then would be darker, showing through underneath.
I see.
And it was a quick way to paint. But I'd usually spend anywhere from 4 hours to 8 hours painting the field, and then maybe spend an hour or two in the studio the next day fine tuning it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
So wow, I've tried plein air myself, and it's very difficult. And one of the things I find difficult about it is the sun's moving all day, so the light is changing.
Yep.
And,
this is where I would decide. Sometimes I decided as soon as I found something. But if I was just walking around and I wasn't seeing anything, I would. If it got too late in the day, I knew what I wanted to do was going to take me too much longer. So I would plan for the next day, and but what I would see, I'd plant in my mind where I wanted the sun to be coming from. And if it was going to be in the afternoon, I would block it in with an idea of where it is there. Otherwise, if I wanted like a morning sun rather than the evening sun, I would just keep that in mind and lay it out so I knew what I was doing from that morning.
Oh, you prepped your canvas before you go out, knowing where and what time of day?
I would do it spontaneously when I'm there. And in fact, sometimes what I had planned from the day before, I found, I think I'm going to go this way in it because I'm not liking what I'm starting to see, and so I would make changes.
Right.
But usually by the halfway through the paintings, I maybe was planning on for that time to come around in the evening to start laying out my highlights. So it was just a matter of the subject where I wanted that. If I looked at something and saw I like it just like it is, I painted in that direction to get that sun for that time.
So one painting per outing?
Huh?
One painting per outing per day?
Most of the time, I had done some at times where I'd go out and I would take 3 or 4 small canvases with me and do studies where I might spend an hour on it.
Okay.
Then move on to another one. And
yeah.
After about 3 or 4, I'd tire out because it's mental fatigue of making so many.
Yeah.
You know,
and fighting the bugs.
While your mind as you're working, I wouldn't do like a lot of artists where I do one section and move to the other one. I was jumping around a bit. So
a lot of thinking.
Yeah. There's my tickly nose again. There.
So did you paint alla prima? In other words, without any mediums, just straight paint?
No, my mediums is the one I'm talking about, where I would vary the oil, varnish, and turpentine
Mixed
mixture.
together. Okay.
Right.
The old school style.
Depending on how hot it was
Right.
and what direction I'm painting from, and
So your ratio paint, depending on the temperature, changed between
because
oil, turpentine, and
I
varnish.
knew what I wanted to get to,
Right.
and I wanted that background to get tacky enough that when I actually put other paint down on that, I knew what my mixture was there.
Yeah.
And when an hour from now, when I come back, I can put another color on top of that.
Yeah. I should come up.
Because the tackiness of the paint, I knew that what I put on, it would grab on to
Yes.
it, right?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't break that tackiness. Because once you start kind of getting the layers up there, I didn't want to have them start blending.
Understood.
I was trying to build up on it all.
It's a nice look when the background shows through in places. It can be very effective. Well, I'll have to come up to your house and maybe you'll share some secrets with me.
Yeah, well, even though I'm not painting out on location anymore, I did so much of it in the past that I...
Yeah. I'm curious, what trails, where did you go around here to find your subject matter?
Yeah? Wow.
You have a favorites?
No, I would just walk around town, and if I saw something I liked, that I would come back and paint it the next day or something.
Okay, so you did a lot of plein air here in town,
Yeah,
and so you're.
and I went up on the mountain
Okay.
and I
Mingus?
painted some landscapes that kind of covered the whole
The panorama.
valley and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in town, and I did a lot of close-ups where I would see something that you wouldn't even see anything of the town other than a wall or
Okay.
a stairwell and a doorway, and you know, I
Yeah.
would just cherry pick different things.
So you kind of switched from pure landscape to
Yeah.
a more intimate
Right.
Jerome scenes,
And-
because that was more saleable here in town for your gallery, subject matter
No,
from Jerome.
No, because I always had my etchings too, which were totally different because I started that in '67 and I was still using in my etching press and doing etchings, which were totally different.
Right. I don't
Now-
think I've ever seen any of your etchings.
Yeah, well, even some of my paintings I changed because when you do etchings, most of the time you'll see small pieces of work. And when you rub the ink into the lines you've etched, and you take your cheesecloth and you start getting the excess, you don't want to try to pull any ink out of the lines,
Right.
but you have to clean it up. Well, if you saw some of mine that I advanced, I started cleaning the background so it was perfectly white. So very few etchings you see anybody that's ever done are perfectly white paper.
Right.
But I use talcum powder and Q-tips. And so all around where the images were, I would leave the ink in where it still had its tone, but I'd keep clean away from the lines, right?
Yes. Boy,
and
that's
once I got it
tedious.
far enough away, then I could take big parts out, right?
Right.
But yeah, maybe you never saw any of my.
I haven't seen any of your etchings. No, I've
Oh.
seen a lot of your paintings.
Okay, yeah. So my etchings were moving me in a direction that was a different in my painting.
Different subject
Because
matter.
these white background things,
Oh,
I
yeah.
started painting that way, putting subject matter, very detailed and everything, of objects, and I worked a lot of birds into it, because they have a soft texture, and I used a lot of rough, worn woods and everything, so they kind of were the opposite to it and all
Gotcha.
that.
Contrast
In
in.
fact, there's up in the co-op, there's a piece I painted up there where I used some of the same techniques I used in my etchings. And that.
Okay.
But because it was from a painting I did back in the '70s.
Yeah. So you're self-taught.
Huh?
You're a self-taught painter. Yeah. Did
That's
you-
why it was harder to get into the abstract, because when you look up the word abstract, you're looking for the essence of something.
Right.
You're looking into
More
it.
conceptual.
And that's where Aristotle even said, art is not necessarily what you see from the outside. You're trying to capture the inner meaning of what you're seeing.
Yes.
And even in portrait painting and that's what you try to
Of course.
find stuff that, you get to know the person a little bit, and then I don't know how that evolves that way, but something in your
I don't
mind.
think we really do. We don't know.
Yeah,
how it-
it's just what you start putting paint down, what then
Yes.
comes out.
And something comes through you.
Yeah.
Some intelligence that's below our conscious mind.
That's that fourth dimension.
Yeah.
That's what my abstracts are all about.
Well, let's get to that in a minute, but I want to just finish up a little bit about. Did you hang out with other painters? Trade ideas since you're self-taught?
Well, I hung out with them and drank with them.
And drank with them. So,
No,
and
by
said,
the time
damn,
I
this
got to
art
that,
business is hard.
I most of the time I spend so much time on my art. It's time to get away from it.
Yeah, you have
So I necessarily not necessarily would volunteer much about what I'm doing unless,
Oh, okay.
like with you, you're asking me questions, and then I would get into it, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just like to BS about other stuff.
Okay.
You
Take
know.
your mind off the art.
Yeah.
You have to, don't you?
Yeah, and I think with most artists, maybe that's it. Although I would talk about art with some younger artists, but if they were artists my age and that, all I had to do was look at their work and I knew what they were doing.
Right.
And I assumed that they could look at mine and figure it out.
Right.
Now, the second part there, I could tell by their work they weren't seeing what I was seeing because they were painting, because they were on their own trip of how they were painting.
Yeah.
Right. And they maybe picked up some things, and because I would pick up stuff that I saw in other people's work. Yeah, that's pretty interesting technique there. I may try that someplace.
Yeah.
But I was not trying to copy any of their work or anything like
No,
that.
I understand.
Yeah, I guess, you know.
You kind of steal it and
Tech-
make it your
technique
own
and stuff,
technique.
yeah.
Yeah, sure.
What makes theirs different from mine and
Yeah.
so
Yes.
forth.
Yeah.
So,
Did you were you involved or around the music scene that was happening around that time?
well, around town, I involved myself in sports.
In sports.
Oh yeah, high school, basketball, even after they moved the stuff up here and lost it down there. So I was
You
obviously,
coached.
and I ran all my life. So, oh yeah, running was my introduction to high school, because like I said, I hope you don't mind if my,
No,
I don't know why my nose is tickling, but anyway. Yeah, because I grew up along the coast with Dad logging, and they had the logging outfits he worked for, what they called gyppos, for gypsies.
Okay.
The war had ended. Remember, this isn't too many grades up from when I was 6 years old.
Right.
When he was logging by the time I was supposedly in the first grade. Along the coast, and the guys were getting out of the service, getting their $5,000 or $6,000. You know, you got some kind of money getting out. The war had ended, right?
Right.
And they were buying land along the coast, and it was all timber. And somebody had to come in, cut the trees down, right? And that's what this outfit my dad worked for. They would come in, find a spar tree, which was close to where the guy wanted to build a house and his barns and everything. Take that main tree, run a cable up through it, through block and tackle, and then they go out and start cutting trees down, bucking them up into certain lengths so they could be milled. And once that was done, they pulled them in, and they removed the donkey, which was just like a big fishing reel with a cable on it, and would pull it in, and they'd remove that and brought in a sawing operation. And I remember there's a blade bigger than this table around, just a big round saw blade, and then it had the green chain. This is where the lumber would be cut, and it ran on a track, and you had to flip the logs.
Right. Just like the old sawmill up at.
Same thing, just
yeah.
a bit bigger than that, but not so big that you couldn't move it from, it was, and they'd bring it in, they'd cut it down, stack the lumber up, and then my dad, because he had this experience as a powder monkey,
Okay.
he would come in later and to put small charges on all the tree roots and loosen them up, so the guy could, either with a horse, a mule, or a tractor, whatever you had, you could remove the stumps.
Right. Clear the land.
And start building, and then it was down the road again to the next one.
Right. Well, Jim, what do you think Jerome is a special place as it relates to the arts and music and that sort of stuff? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah.
Would you maybe expound on it a little bit?
I knew that from early on that this town would grow, and I'd been around enough old western towns that had been something before they became a tourist town.
Right.
And I knew that Jerome, it was ideal, I thought, in my mind. I'm close enough, I can go back and forth to Phoenix and have shows down there and get back home again. And vice versa, people could come up here and
Right.
get back. And I just knew that it would eventually grow. And I was part of that growth for a long, early period when there were very few artists in town up until, because for a while I was the only one. When the other, Roger Holt died and the other two left, and it was me. So it was then opening up a gallery. I was one of the few shops that was around.
Right.
So the wife ran the gallery, and I basically provided the work and the shipping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we did really good with that. And
amazing. Were all the shops filled at that time, or were there lots of empty ones?
There were empty shops around. It just.
But you had enough tourist traffic to keep you guys well fed, huh?
Yeah, and we had the two bars, right? And
yes,
you know,
Bar A and Bar B.
Yeah, that's about it. And you know, it had its uniqueness this way because a lot of people like to see the old bars in the West.
Yes.
Because this is where people did hang out. You know, what other entertainment did you have that much? And the movie theater was probably the biggest one. And I often wondered during that mining time when that Second World War was getting going, where I sat in the theaters watching all of it. And the fact that I could read that was up on the screens and that really was my education. Until this day, I still kind of lean on that schooling I got.
Yeah,
right.
I agree with you. The school should be more like that these days. It's a really excellent system, but I guess the size of classes, the number of kids, it's a little too big, huh?
Really, because if you did that, had the classes like that, you knew the kids that could bypass the next grade, you know, and I know that you could move them along faster.
Yeah.
And the ones that are moving a little slower, you might maybe move into the next grade, but you're going to have somebody that's in that class that can come and help you,
Right.
other than just the teacher.
Yeah.
So you could handle bigger classes, and the ones that are helping are just getting better at becoming teachers themselves if they wanted
Right,
to.
right.
So it was a system to me that built upon itself, you know, an importance to it.
Indeed. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's take a little break, and maybe we'll finish up a little bit of Jerome and your thoughts on it, and then we can move on to some of your ideas about art and where you're headed with that.
Okay, this was a good Jerome one. And trying to remember, it goes back quite a ways because my hat here,
Yeah.
Army Aviation, the Apache helicopter,
Oh yeah.
that was their most prominent, well-liked, usable piece of equipment the military had, right? Well, I even had a basketball team that had, from the res down here, there were like 8 of us I put together, 6 of them Indians and myself and some other, I forget even who it was. And I checked with Prescott, you know, and I was looking around for some place to put a team together. And So Prescott, I contacted them because I read someplace they were going to have a summer league basketball and all that, and so and this was early on. It was in the early mid-70s, right? And I said, I got a basketball team and want to join your league. Oh, great. I said, we're from Jerome and everything, and I paid the amount of money, and I got paperback when our first game was, and so I let the guys know. That's when they were playing. They would come up from the res, come up here to play basketball in the gym, right? And so the night we go there, everything seemed fine, and but you got to remember this was Prescott, and the difference was I've got an Indian team and they got a bunch of cowboys, and we didn't get past the first 30 seconds because I involved myself as the point guard just to start with, right, and that, and shoot, we hardly even get going, and man, there's an opening to the basket, so I'm going for it, and I did, and some big guy steps in front of me and throws a forearm into my chest and knocks me halfway across the floor, and the best thing was the sound I heard. The Indians, they almost like war whoops, they jumped up and loudly, right? I'm saying it, oh shit, I got the Indians backing me. And of course, the Cowboys got up off the bench. A big fight ensued.
Oh my goodness.
They had to call police and everything in there, and the game was canceled right away. And this was like on a Friday or something, and so, you know, Friday night, and the weekend goes by, and a couple days into the weekend, in the mailbox I get this envelope, and it comes from Prescott. The only thing it had on a piece of white paper, it wasn't signed or anything, and it just threefold on it. Oh, we don't like your kind over here. That's all. It was all, we don't like your kind. Very, very short, abrupt, and to the point.
Yes, I guess. My
I'm
goodness.
going, yeah, I could have figured that by what happened that night, right?
Boy, so prejudice was alive and well.
That's what it was like, even in
And when
the
was
70s.
this? In the 70s, huh?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah. There was stuff went on between Camp Verde and Jerome, because it was considered now a hippie place, and all the cowboys from Camp Verde would drive up here to drink and get in fights.
No kidding.
And so, yeah, when I started seeing guys coming in that wearing cowboy hats, uh-oh, something's going to happen tonight. If I stick around, I'll be involved. Because in the beginning, sometimes I would stick around and realize that, man, I don't want to get into fights. You know, if I'm going to fight with somebody, it's going to be because I want to.
Right.
Like that. But yeah, it was the Cowboys, Indians that were still.
No kidding.
But now it's totally different. All the cowboys that got long hair and they smoke dope.
Yeah. And their music has changed too.
Yeah, so there's this blending taking place, but it took a few years.
Yeah. Wow. Well, any other recollections about events in Jerome that stick in your mind as significant?
No, I would have to have something that would stimulate something coming up on there, because
Okay.
so much of what nothing to me of interest is stuck in my mind, I guess, is all I can say on that.
Well,
I can maybe think of something and let you know later, but
well, if you do right now, bring it up. But I'm going to ask you a question I've asked all my interviewees, and that is, imagine yourself speaking to Jeromans 50 years from now, what would you tell them about this place, and how should they
Basically, things like I just told you with the cowboys and
Okay.
Indians. You know,
Well,
because that's hard for anybody to imagine in the 70s that happening.
That's true. Well, let me ask you this. Do you feel Jerome has some special character, different from other places? And
Oh,
why?
yeah, because the fact is we sit on an ore body. And to me, see, they talk about what's going on in the osmosis, everything out over in Sedona, that they have these spiritual places and everything. To me, we are at the center of it. They are on the living periphery of an ore body that has its own energy. Now, it's depleted quite a bit, but there's still something to this, to me, that's an energy field. And we are the heart of it, where they are, especially when I get into my abstract thinking, they're on the periphery.
How would you describe the character of the energy around here?
I think it draws artistic people. I think people that have that, even if they don't come, if they sense it when they're here. Jerome is different, and they maybe can't explain it, but they really like Jerome for whatever they're getting from it.
Right.
And the mining part of it is all over with, you know, and the harm they did is because Jerome hardly had anything living off the ground back in the 60s. It was pretty depleted, right? And then they moved all the smelting down into Clarkdale, and all the Indians lost their peach and apricot orchards all along the river. All that stuff.
Yes.
It's, I guess, heavy metallic or whatever that's in the air.
Yeah. From the
And
smelter.
poisonous. And it's hard to imagine people living and breathing it, you know, when that all was going on.
Yeah.
I bet a lot of lives were shortened up during that time.
Probably. Well, I know what you're talking about. When I first moved up here, I would come, I visited a little bit, but every time I would drive up from the gulch down below past the high school, that whole long trip, when I first started moving here especially, I could just feel some kind of, I called it electricity, some kind of energy thing every time I drove up, and it would have an effect on my consciousness. Now, I've been here 25 years now, and I don't feel it as much anymore, but I distinctly remember feeling that physically.
Yeah, well, this is it. Life is changing so much that they even are now saying if you live at higher altitudes, time passes faster.
Interesting.
It's the Explorer magazine. I get that's one of their latest articles is when they were talking about time and with Einstein and what's going on, that it's not the same at different altitudes.
Interesting.
And I never even dawned on me about some of this stuff, but they're kind of figuring it all out, you know.
We're both 34.
Yeah, right. Something like that.
Well, yeah. If you wanted to say something to people that are going to be here 50 years from now, anything you feel is important they should know about maintaining the culture here?
It's hard to know what it's going to be like 50 years from now.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see the growth from the mining period up until where we are now, and the changes taking place. But I have no idea if Jerome 50 years from now will be still existing.
Maybe not. How do you feel about the changes that have happened, say, in the last 5-10 years?
The growth that's taking place now is so much different than it was, say, then, and even in the last 15 years, because the population of Phoenix doubled to where it's a couple million now, and back then there was hardly a million. And you have people moving from colder climates that are trying to get to where it's warmer and everything, but they still have attitudes that come from another area, and now they're down in the desert and they come up here, and it's like, I don't know, when there's so many people in there, maybe the ones that come early in the morning will notice a certain sense of calmness. It's quiet, you know, people are just waking up and everything, and then they, I think, will notice the beauty of Mother Nature out here and man's creation right here in Jerome, right, and what it went through and that. So I don't know how much 50 years will change any of that. You can only get so many people in town at the same time.
That's kind of our advantage, isn't
and
it?
There's two different things we get. Now we get the ones that are coming up that have become citizens of the state. Then we get the passerbys that don't even know what they're going to find here. Right. They just are following a map to get them to some place and go, whoa. To me, this has to be something totally different. So you wouldn't expect from a little town on the side of a mountain, right? Right. So I think there's those that have that surprise interest and really find it interesting, and maybe other masses of people around on the street, they don't see that as unusual because they're around that more anyway. Right. But if they are, the traveler that's just passing through, they'll notice when night rolls around and everything rolls up and it quiets down, except for the bars where there's some action happening. That's when you kind of find what it was like maybe beyond us when it was still a mining town. Right. The mines would go on 24/7. But everything else quieted down because it was nighttime and that. And so maybe there's just a difference in that electricity that comes from it. And because now it's just different. Yes. Because there was even 4 guys early on when I was up here, they were taking the claim and they went in and they were trying to high grade, follow veins and all that, and they were hauling ore out, and they only lasted about a year or 2, and it wasn't profitable enough for them to do it because they had to take the ore, get it out, then haul it up to Ash Fork or someplace where they could get it on a train to get it someplace where they could get it milled.
Not very efficient.
It was too complicated, I think, for them.
Yeah. I just thought of a question. Did you were an artist down in Scottsdale, big city compared to here. Did you feel more artistic freedom being in Jerome because of the community or the environment?
No, it was mainly an outlet that I had that my art from the beginning grew into, from the first things I started selling when I got in the state, and I just kind of grew with it, with what was going on in Scottsdale, because it was that kind of now through tourists and that, there probably always were, but when I was first involved down there, that was in the mid-'60s and that, and it had a few pretty good galleries, but right now I think Jerome has as many good galleries as they had there at that time.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So, well, any other stories you want to share?
Oh, let's see. I have to have something that usually stimulates me on it.
How about the drug bust? How about
Oh, well, that was one of the ones during that period of time because Ron, our police chief,
yeah, I had
he
him
kind
here
of got
last week.
blamed for a lot of what happened. But that's only because if you kept it to yourself, basically that, he didn't give a shit, you know.
Right, that's
There
what he
is
said.
a problem.
Yeah.
So dumping that on him wasn't really right, but the newspapers, and when they start selling it and all that, it wanted to make it look like, oh, the law was in on it.
Involved, yes.
And that wasn't true at all. It was
That's what the story he told. I had him here 2 weeks ago and did an interview, and he told me the whole story, and he said, you know, I didn't want to be part of it. The feds came to me and said, we're going to do this bust, and he said, it's my community, these are all my friends,
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. And so then they wired some guy and tried to get him set up, and then they charged him. So that's quite the story.
Yeah, right. That was totally wrong.
Yeah.
But that's what they wanted because that sells papers and
Right.
stuff, you know. You got to make it into something that grabs people's attention.
Yeah.
And
Well, anything you want to add before we wrap it up today?
no, because if we get together again, I can
Yeah.
kind of go back easier, and I can, like you were showing me your art, and I got to know a lot more about you just but what I've seen here,
Yeah.
which was really good. And so maybe,
Well, let's do a special project between you and me where we just,
Okay.
I can do an interview that has nothing to do with the Historical Society, and we can just talk about art. I would like to do that.
okay,
Okay?
sure.
And you can get into more of the technical stuff, which I personally would be more interested in than maybe the Historical Society and that stuff. But I want to thank you very much
Yeah, well,
for taking the time to do this.
Ellen, who we were together over 30 years, and the wife and I were about the same thing, and she had things she wanted to do, and my daughters were in college up at NAU, and that was my son and I, and he was in his senior year, and we sold the house, and Zane and I lived at the high school by ourselves because there was nobody else except Ann's dad, right? And that lasted about a year and a half. No, about a year but he was going to be a senior. He says, Dad, why don't we move to Cottonwood and I can be closer to my friends? And I was sitting on some money and wanted to do something. I said, well, yeah, I might as well buy something down there. I can always sell it and recoup my money and everything. So on 2nd Street, God, I don't know why, something's in the air, but my nose itches. Anyway, I bought the house on 2nd Street, and you know the bar, what's it, Kate's or whatever?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
If you went one block over, I bought an old concrete house. 1929, a walkway had been built in it. Good solid 8-inch thick concrete walls. And behind it was an old adobe. And next to that old adobe was a tank that was concrete's about like this, and took up a space of about a third of this room. And there was a well on the property, and they kept that full of water because that was from when they were still pulling carts around, you know, and they would dip a hose in here and run the thing down someplace because Old Town was pretty small at the time in 1929, right?
Right.
And that's where they would hand pump water out of this tank for fighting fires.
I'll be damned.
And the house, I found out on the back because I wanted to put a different system in for part of the sewer because it was acting up. And about this far down, I hit something real hard, and here's a concrete about this wide, had a swale to it, and they could tell it ran kind of downhill, so they were watering for gardening or growing crops or whatever it is as it angled towards the river.
Okay.
And I wouldn't have known that if I
Right.
hadn't have been digging for the other.
Did you move down there with your family for a little while?
Huh?
Did you move down there with
Just
your
my
family?
my son and I.
Oh, okay.
He wandered around. Like I said, the girls would come to visit, but they
And
came.
and your wife was still up here.
No, because she went off, and the girl. I bought that place in between us selling and me eventually moving from the high school down there. So they would come on weekends. They'd come down to Cottonwood.
Oh.
I mean, and
But they were living up here, your wife and your daughters.
no,
And you and your son were down there. I'm lost.
no, the timing was as such that I bought the house, but I only was in it for a couple of years.
Okay.
Then came up here.
Oh, I see. And then when did you buy the house on the boardwalk?
There was a group of us bought a whole claim.
Oh, right. You were part of that group.
Right, and took a few years to divvy it all up into property lines and
Right.
everything, because the state is real strict on it from days back when
You had to replot
they were
it.
selling land in the desert and saying, oh yeah, you have these lots, and they were putting signs up, and all it was dirt. And then a lot of them were reselling in the East Coast lots to different people, the same
property,
lots.
right, right.
And then, the idea was sell as many as you can and disappear.
You get the hell out of town,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, how long have you owned that house up on the boardwalk?
I think I gotta try to remember what years. It must have been in the early 90s. I'm very bad at keeping track
Okay.
of
So
stuff like that.
That was after. I assume you got divorced from your first wife.
Yeah,
And then
and-
you married Ellen.
And
Or
no,
I
we
don't know if you
we,
never
we
got married.
never married.
Okay. But
Yeah.
you guys moved into that house together, up on the boardwalk. You
Up
and
on
Ellen.
the boardwalk, yeah.
Okay.
Right, and so it was, by then, there had to be, because they closed it down 52, 53, 63, they had to be, when we bought the properties, close to 30 years, they had someplace in there, they had been empty. In the Historical Society, they would have paperwork on, because they took it over as watchdogs, and for $50 you could live in one of the houses, but you just had to maintain it enough that nobody else, because people were coming and stealing stuff from it, tearing things off the houses and
Right.
for souvenirs, like who knows what. And so that was the first part of it. But all along, the idea was that hopefully the mines would tire of it, and they're not going to do any mining anymore. So we bought the whole claim.
Right.
The only thing didn't come with the claim was the UVX, where the businesses on Main Street
right.
and apartments.
Yes.
Yeah. And so my house is, you may turn the corner to go by the Spirit Road. If you look straight up, my big tree used to be the biggest. Now, but I still think it is, but half of it, the tree split and part of it fell towards the apartments some years back.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, Ellen and I became part. I was going to do it on my own. And she and I were hanging out together. She has her daughter, Heather, who, when I met, she was 7 years old. Okay, this is where we can kind of figure it out. And she's 42 now. So see, that many years go by when we moved up. Now, she lived in the Haskins apartments for a couple of years. And then she went to work for the Historical Society someplace back in then for 7 years.
Ellen did?
Yeah, she
Okay.
for about 7 years she did all the paperwork and everything, handling the. She was real good at that. And then I think for more money, she went to work for the town for another 7 years. So that's about 15 years about where she was the zoning administrator.
Right.
And she had one of these memories. For the town, she handled paperwork for billing and all that, and she knew everybody's name and address. She could just come up with it. Plus, in the zoning part of it, there's a pretty good sized book about what you can do and can't do.
Yes.
She memorized all that, and when somebody came in, whatever the subject matter was, she could go to the right page and spell out what they can and can't do. And sometimes it was stuff that they can't do. Then they'd get upset and try to talk to the mayor or whoever was up there, and they would try to talk her into doing, no, this is here for a reason, right? And so you can't do favorites. You know, everybody has to live by the same rules.
Same rules, yeah.
So she developed, because everybody was still trying, hey, such and such says that we could do it. Oh, right here it says you can't. Yeah, but they're mayor. Well, that doesn't mean anything.
A tough spot to be in.
Yeah, and so finally she quit because she did have with a few of our mayors that were, pat me on the back and I'll do the same for you.
Yeah.
And she just would do it. And I'm the mayor and I'm telling you to do it. Well, I'm telling you, I'm the zoning administrator and it says right here, you can't do that. And it had a hard time for some of them thinking that they could be like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And just rule like, well, I'm king here,
Right.
and you're not, and this is what we're gonna. She fought him and she wouldn't give in to him,
Interesting. Well, I remember.
So she had a reputation for being real tough.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yes.
Yeah,
Well, you guys did quite a bit of, or you did quite a bit of restoration on that home.
Oh yeah, I did. I put a lot into it.
Yeah,
But I was into it anyway because when I decided to get into my abstract end, I basically cut off a lot of my connections because in my mind I thought, okay, I may want to be building myself a house no matter where it is. So I started drawing up plans for people in town because having been the mayor and been around, I saw the kind of plans that came into the town that were getting approved for things you could do. Now, inside your home, you can't do anything about it. But if you're going to do it outside, there are rules you got to live by. And I wanted to learn their things. If I went someplace else, they'd have the same kind of zoning.
Sure.
They're just basics in zoning that you've got to live by. And so I've got a drawer full of plans I drew for people. The building that is up across from the English kitchen, or which now it's the barbecue place, that building's there. I drew all the plans for that.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and Jack and Anna Ray, who I did it for, who owned the building, they wanted something that had a livable space up above and a workspace down below. So that's what that was built for.
Okay.
And the only thing that I didn't get involved on, because I never had a chance to, was they wanted the plans, copies of it. So, okay, so they started looking for builders before they went to the bank. And they even told me, well, your plans are pretty concise because these builders haven't seen any plans really that concise before. Well, I did it because I wanted to build it. So I priced everything else, everything that I was going to need and want, and then I put a bid in on it myself. But I was $10,000 over everybody else's bid, right? And when they took it to the bank, it was like, oh, well, he's not an accredited architect. We can't loan you money off of that.
Right.
So I had to go to our local architect and get a rubber stamp on it. And I think I had charged them $1,800 because I worked fully on just their house,
Right.
drawing these plans. And maybe I was a little slow at it because it was not something that I did. But I kept track of what it was going to cost for everything and all that. And I wanted it a little trickier front. I wanted it to look more like it was old to start with concrete. So I planned on casting concrete things and anchoring them to the
Okay.
concrete wall,
Yeah.
right? Because there's ways of doing that. And that's what was going to cost the extra. And they simplified the front of it, but I can even show you if you come up with the
Oh,
plans.
yeah.
Plans that I drew up.
I'd love to see them.
And he charged me like $1,600 for putting his rubber stamp. That was a lesson to be learned.
Ah, no kidding.
You know, you're interloping in a field that it's not yours and it's mine, and this is what's going to cost you.
Yeah.
So I got $200 for a month's work, but I still have my plans.
There you go.
And they were able to use them then to build.
Okay.
They just didn't have to finish off the front like I had.
Right, right.
So
Well,
that's one of my projects in town. But all others, my very first one started with a nephew of mine that was building a place up in Eastern Oregon, and still is a commercial plumber, and he does homes and building. You know, he's made a big thing out of it. But one house that he was going to build for himself, I went up there and worked with him on doing the foundation for a simple house on flat ground and everything, and worked through that with him. And from that, I kept going to more complex stuff to do. And
okay, cool.
so
Well,
by the time I got at working on the house, I could do the electrical, I could do the plumbing, I knew how to do it all, right? And
Wow.
that was my idea, is to put myself into that house with the idea that next thing might be mine. And if I wanted, it's just something I would build in town or on the outskirts.
Okay.
If I built it in the county, I wouldn't have to follow the rules.
Right.
I would have to follow some rules, but not the town rules.
Not the aesthetic.
So there was a
Exterior.
reason for that year or two or whatever I took, and I drew up a lot of plans, and I'd have to look through them again. I wouldn't even recognize some of it. And,
Huh. Well, we can do that
yeah,
as well.
but that would take me into my etching period and stuff like
Wait
that.
a minute. You mentioned something about hot dogs.
Oh yeah.
Let's finish
There wa-
with
there-
that story.
There was a hot dog cart that was in town, and this was interesting because there became an adversarial group kind of on it, and the cart they boiled them around, and they had a little business, but it never really took off. And I always, as I watched them and saying nothing's happening, and then they shut it down, and for about a year or two, it just sat in one place where I saw that, you know what, I could turn that into a good business. And I did. It was a mobile cart. It was built on a old Harley Davidson three-wheeler that had been for going around marking tires
Yeah.
in the cities like.
Uh-huh.
And it was just kind of worn out. But I built, and I can show you pictures on a kind of a gypsy back on it, where you had a rounded roof with an overhang, and And it looks like kind of a little gypsy wagon. You opened it up behind, but what I did is I put a grill on it that you could pull it out during the day, and it was gas operated because I put a gas on it. I didn't want to deal with coals and all that. You shut it off and the grill. But I had it set up so people could, I had a glass shield and they could look in and point out what hot dog they want. I developed 3 different relishes that I wouldn't poison anybody. It could sit out in the sun for days, right? And that was popular. And if you wanted onions on your hot dog, it had to have a piece that's got, I put cilantro in it. And the stuff I put on, the 3 different relishes were very southwestern, all 3 of them. Right, so, and down in Cottonwood, the market that was down there that goes back, it shut down and it developed into Food City.
Okay.
Right? And they made their own buns in their bakery, and they were bigger, and even the formula was different than regular hot dog buns, but they were really good. People commented on the buns a lot. So I would open it up. This was part of when I was still doing other work, construction work that had to do, but I worked this hot dog business in because I wanted to be profitable, and it was. And with the relishes, and I had at least this long, I had a rack up above with all different hot sauces, different brands and everything. If you want to heat it up, put whatever you want on it.
I had heard stories about the hot dog stand. I didn't know it was you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, when was this?
And then Heather, Ellen's daughter, and Cindy. You know Cindy? She works at Paul and Jerry's.
Yeah, Sid. She lives across the street from me.
Yeah.
Sid Barker? No.
I forget.
Yeah, Sid.
Yeah, well, she and Heather during the summertime, because they were still in high school, close to their junior, seniors years, whatever in there. And I had a spot and a letter from the town at the top of from the mayor right outside the spirit room by that dead fire hydrant. I had that corner. And I wish I wouldn't have lost it. Maybe someplace in all my old paperwork I got it. But that was my permanent spot. Said so right on it. And, you know, the mayor at the time knew he wasn't going to be mayor again probably. But what did they do? The enemies of it, because they could see I had a hell of a good business. And when Heather in the summertime, Cindy out in shorts and halter tops and everything, there wasn't a biker that didn't come out of the bar to buy hot dogs. Right, and so it was a thriving business. I could even make money on. Now I would prep everything for them. Because I always did that really early in the morning, and I would pick up the buns, and I had to have a place for putting all the hot dogs. And in the spirit room, in the cooler, I had a special little spot where I could keep them for a while, right?
Keep them cold, yeah.
And so I always had because you have to state tests. You have to have a place to keep things cold,
right.
All of that, and I covered all those ends. And the only way what really irritated me is I joined the Chamber of Commerce, that we finally had one in town, right? So the first meeting I go to, I'm in the back, and I start hearing these complaints from the other restaurants that it wasn't fair, that I didn't have to pay for water and I didn't have to pay for electricity and all that, and I had this prime spot. And I'm listening to this and why the hell did I didn't say anything, but I gave you guys $50 to join, and all I'm getting to hear right in the beginning is you guys wanting to get rid of me. So then that's when I knew that, okay, I'm up against another group. So what do? They bring in a guy You know, the big rock by the bulletin board?
Yeah.
Right in there where there's kind of parking for,
Yes.
you know, for people that need private parking, to, you know, because they're invalids or whatever.
Right.
They park them right, oh no, first they parked them right in front of Paul and Jerry's. Well, he bitched about that. He didn't want this guy there. And but they were trying to put competition against me. But it was still the boiled hot dogs is what he was delivering, right? Then Jerry talked him into get rid of them, so that's when they moved them over there. Well, that's when the fire department was complaining because there's going to be in their way, right? And it wasn't really, but they're trying to get rid of me on the
Any way they could do it.
yeah. And finally they couldn't, and then it became, well, he's a hazard on the corner. The car, and it never was for some years there. Nobody ever complained, and nothing. There was no parking there anyway, and the car was small enough it fit right in, so you could turn the corners, and it was out of the way. And then, who was mayor then? His family owned the castle down in
Chovery.
huh?
Chovery.
Phil Tovery.
Right.
He was mayor, and he was just against me having it there, and I confronted him on it, and that his basic idea was if you don't like it, you could just move. And we met standing by the Methodist church. For some reason, our paths crossed there. And that's the closest somebody ever came to me decking them right there. I should leave. My idea is, well, if you don't like it, you should leave. You know, and so then I knew I had the town against me. And then even the chief of police, which was a real jerk, he would come around getting close to me, see if he could smell marijuana on me and stuff like that, right? He liked the hot dogs and the price on them, but I knew why he was doing it. It was to get close. He wanted to bust me for something, and then they couldn't, right? And finally, it was, oh, I'm a hazard on the street and the highway, right. And so you're going to have to find someplace else. And the spot they told me was down by that middle park.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have all that parking. There wasn't that much traffic down there. And I can see people would walk right by me, you know, and if they want to eat, they would eat uptown, one of the restaurants. So I never took them up on it. And eventually I had the car up on the hill, and I wasn't using it. And then I took it down, and I thought my son-in-laws, one of them would pick up on it, that it would be a good business. And they didn't, so then I just sold it, and I don't ever know where it went. That's one of the things I wish I had been able to keep it going.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
because
if you still had it.
The girls made each $100 a day. They were making good money a week, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And able to buy what they wanted, and you know, and they would have time off because I wouldn't have them working 7 days a week. I let them have the weekends, and then I would take a couple of the others. And,
yeah.
And it was paying for me, and I didn't have to spend a lot of time except getting the relishes and all that going.
Right. Now this was...
Oh, and it was sold by the Indians. I knew, because I would park it across the street in the parking lot, you know, unless there was a time I had to move it and I'd take it up to the house. In some way, they left the bar because there was a trail of them coasting down the mountain. Now we had a motor and it would run, but they were going pretty fast because napkins and stuff were blowing. out, and I followed the trail all the way down to where the Quick Check was. There always was a little market there before the roundabouts and everything like that. And it didn't get quite that far because they turned there where the old water tank, wooden one that's for Clarkdale. It's just after you get up there, it's on the right-hand side.
Yes.
They turned on the dirt road there and pushed it over and pushed it into a wash that was out there, so you couldn't spot it. But I knew because all the paper stuff in that ended at that point and kind of turned off, and I found it and we were able to get it all there, get it up. But then their trail kind of went off at an angle headed towards the reservation because they took whatever they could from it. Okay, fine. You know, they just used it as transportation to get down the hill. So
that's funny.
Yeah, well, that was one of those stories out of the past there. But the business really worked out good.
Cool.
So
that's a good story.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors about the hot dog stand, and it seems I remember people saying we should start another hot dog stand. That would be great. And I'm hearing other people say no, they won't let anybody do that anymore. Or
yeah,
something
that was it.
Yeah. What was the name of the stand? Did you have a name for it?
The Motherlode Grill.
The Motherlode Grill.
And it was LOAD. You know, like
okay.
A load.
Yes.
Mom's load. So
right.
yeah.
Well, that's a great.
I think I still have a sign for it someplace.
That'd be funny to see. Well, that was a great story to end on. I think we're going to stop for now.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll pick up the artwork when I come up to your house.
Great.
And I'm going to give you a ride up the hill too.
Okay, yeah, the sun is still out there.
Yeah.
Coming down.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you
Okay,
very
Mike.
much.
Coming down, yeah, but so my Apache's basketball team, I even printed, I still screened up t-shirts, and our team was called the Round Ball Rebels.
The Round Ball Rebels. Okay.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and take that off. And Maggie, would you do me a favor of shutting all the cameras down and all this stuff? Well, here, I'll shut this one off. I'm going to stop